So one of the altar boys inside, when I went to the side of the altar, said, "Why is it called Holy Week?" And it was an innocent question, and then some of the other altar boys said, "Yeah, what happened on Sunday? What was Sunday about?" And I think it's important to explain just for a moment about what that question is, because I think we can all have that question and really wonder, why is it called Holy Week, and what is comprising this entire week? Well, on Saturday begins Holy Week. Despite people say it begins on Palm Sunday because they have their books and it starts on Palm Sunday, but Saturday of Lazarus is the beginning of Holy Week, and it's the foreshadowing of the resurrection of Christ. And then on Sunday, Palm Sunday, is Christ coming into the town where he would be accepted, but also it's kind of the beginning of the end. And if we think about Christ's life, he was born, and the icon when Christ was born, he was wrapped in a blanket, but that blanket that he was wrapped in was actually a burial shroud. So if you look at the icon of the birth of Christ, he's wrapped in this burial shroud. And at that point, his birth already starts his death and the mission for his life. He didn't come to earth to be ruler through the ages, or to live in immortality as a human being on the earth. He came to do a specific mission. And at his birth, he starts his mission. And as we see in Holy Week, with the Saturday of Lazarus starting it, we hear it's kind of that reminder that, yes, Christ does rise from the dead. And despite how difficult fasting is, despite how difficult Holy Week is, we have that reminder. And the church is very clear to always celebrate the resurrection of Christ every single Sunday. And if you haven't picked up on that, if you listen to the hymn right before the doxology, right before the liturgy starts, it says, "Today is the day of resurrection." So there's no week that goes by without the celebration of the resurrection. That's why it's only 1 week. That's why Holy Week is only 1 week. So we start with Saturday of Lazarus. We go into Christ coming on the donkey on Palm Sunday as he comes in to start his mission with the people. And then we start to have all these special services that kind of walk us through about each particular day. Now, if you think about your lives, maybe some of you might have little picture frames at home, and your parents might put a picture of you when you were in preschool, then kindergarten, then first grade, second grade, and it might be either a school bus or a circle frame or something like that, and you can see how you grow and you change each of those years. It's the same thing with Holy Week. Each day is something different that Christ did that brings us closer to the point of his crucifixion and then ultimately to his resurrection. So each day unfurls, unwraps, and brings a new dimension of the life of Christ and what he went through. And we see that today in the gospel reading, we hear Christ and he's angry at the Pharisees. He's saying, "You guys are hypocrites. You're saying one thing and you're doing something different." And he's yelling at them because they don't understand. And they're supposed to be the ones who understand more than anybody. And they don't understand. So he's saying all these things about them, that they're dead on the inside, even though they show this greatness on the outside to all these people. So what does that mean for us is we have to be the same on the inside as the outside, because Christ sees right through that. He saw right through that with the Pharisees, who had their long robes, and they would go through the marketplace, and people would say, "Oh, Rabbi, Rabbi." And they would treat them, and they would give them the best seats and the best food, and they were probably, had special dispensation when it came to taxes or whatever the case was. They were treated as royalty, and then they were hurting people and burdening them with things that they themselves wouldn't even do. They were asking them to do things that they wouldn't do. And everyone, throughout life doesn't want to do something that somebody asked them to do that they wouldn't do themselves. So, it would be like me saying to you, "Well, you have to pray, you have to fast, you have to go to church." And on Fridays, I'm drinking beer, eating hot dogs. I never say my prayers, and I stay home every Sunday as a priest. That's what the Pharisees were doing. So they had manipulated everything. They were telling people to do things. And Christ finally says, that's enough. You guys are doing it wrong. You don't understand. And we have to be true and follow the rules of God. And today we remember, too, the virgins, the 5 wise, the 5 foolish, and also the entire understanding of this banquet. So when people say, what is heaven, right? We hear that all the time. And people say, well, I want to go to heaven. And I say, well, why do you want to go to heaven? And usually the response is, because I don't want to go to hell. And then I say, well, what is heaven then? And they say, well, I don't know. It's clouds. It's, it's a free buffet, or it's nice weather. It's a beach. It's what, all these things. But Christ reminds us that it's this giant banquet. And not a banquet in where we sit and think there's going to be long speeches and it's going to take all night and our food's going to be cold or whatever the thing is. It's about sitting with God and enjoying the food that he offers us of himself, the greatness that God offers of himself to us. But he says you have to be ready for that. And if you're dirty, if you're all dirty, I mean, if the altar boys, right? When you come home from school, what's your first thing your mom says to do, right? Wash your hands, maybe wash your face, maybe brush your teeth, maybe go change your shirt. What's that? Do your homework, right? Do your homework. Does she tell you to wash your hands too when you come up? What about, do you brush your teeth at the end of the day? Take out your lunch, right? Why? Because it'll smell. Because the next day, you're not going to want to eat that, right? So, one of the when you go to bed, all right, let's go down this road a little bit. Okay. So you do your homework, you get your lunch out, you do all these other things. But if you played in the dirt outside, right? Do you play outside after you're done with your homework? Yeah. Okay. Do you go in the dust and play baseball or whatever? Not really. Okay. Does anybody get dirty? Do your parents ever tell you you stink and you need to go take a shower? Yes. Okay, there we go, finally. Thought I had a different life growing up than. Okay, so let's agree we all can stink at certain points in time. One of the prayers that was said tonight is the same prayer that's said before Holy Communion, which is, how shall I, who am unworthy, enter into the splendor of the saints? If I dare to enter the bridal chamber, if I dare to go into this place, my clothing will accuse me, since it's not white, it's dirty, it's stinky. So the prayers tonight, too, remind us that when we come forward to God, we have to be clean, we have to be prepared, we have to be good in our hearts and in our souls, and that's this next step today. So yesterday was St. Joseph of Egypt. And like I said, the theme for that was so that we can accept where we're at and realize that God has a plan for us in that point. Now the next step is to say, where am I as a person, and how can I clean myself off? How can I be prepared to enter into the bridal chamber? How can I use my talents for good? Those are some of the other hymns that were tonight. Not to bury our talents, but to use our talents to clean ourselves off and to be prepared for the kingdom of heaven. So as you go into this next step this evening, as you go home and think about your lunch, and if you left it in there, or if you have your smelly socks still stuck in your shoes at home, or whatever the case is, remember that Holy Week, from the beginning to the end, is like a storybook. A story of what happens with Christ. First, he comes on the donkey. Next, he talks to the Pharisees. Next, he's betrayed by his friends, right? And Judas turns him in. Then he's crucified. Then he's hung on the cross. Then he dies on the cross. Then he's taken down from the cross and they do a funeral procession. Then he is put in the tomb. Then those are all the different services. So when you say, what is Holy Week? You could say it's the giant storybook of Christ from starting his work all the way to his death, and then all the way to his resurrection.
Plus, it has more than 5,000 pages.
It has more than 5,000 pages?
Yeah.
What's that, the Bible?
No, the Bible has.
That's why Holy Week is a big, thick book, right? It's the biggest book that you're going to hold all week, and that's why it's a small one. Because if it was a full-size one, you'd have huge biceps by the end of the week, right? So I pray that you continue to think about what you're wearing on the outside, and is it the same as on the inside? Because one of the lines that jumps off the page every time I read it is the outside. He says, you clean the outside of the cup, and you make it clean, but the inside is full of all rapacity and destruction and dirt. And I can't help but think, recently, this was before Lent, I went to a reception. And I went to the reception, and they gave me a glass of water. And stuck on the side of the glass of water was, I don't know what. It was some food or whatever. And I thought, okay, I'm going to scrape that off on the side. But then I realized it was on the inside that it was stuck. And what happened is somebody probably just wiped the outside of the, it came out, they dried it off or whatever, put it, filled it. And I happened, as I went to go drink, I saw this crouton or whatever was stuck to the side of the cup. And I said, how can you miss that? How can you miss seeing that when you have a reception? It's the same thing with us. Don't let the inside be dirty. Take a good look on the inside and the outside. And don't just comb your hair and brush your teeth and say, okay, I look good, and put makeup on or whatever the case is, and deodorant and perfume or cologne, and say, all right, I look good, and then we don't take a look on the inside. So tonight, take a look on the inside, clean it off. Try and clean it off. How do we do that? Through prayer, through fasting, through the sacraments of the church, through reading, through learning about God, through humility, through patience, through forgiveness, through self-forgiveness. All these things will try and help the Holy Spirit enter by us letting him enter and to clean us off on the inside. Amen.